The snow was falling gently as we pulled up to my mother-in-law Sylvia's mansion for the annual Christmas gathering. My husband, Mark, squeezed my hand apologetically, already anticipating his mother's behavior. "Clara, sweetheart, maybe this year will be different," he said, though we both knew better. I adjusted my simple sweater and smiled. "It's fine, Mark. I'm used to it by now." What Sylvia didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had been the anonymous buyer when she'd been forced to sell the mansion last month. After her husband's death, she discovered the estate was in debt, and only a quick sale had prevented foreclosure. I purchased it through a holding company, allowing her to remain as a tenant while I collected rent. She had no idea her despised daughter-in-law was now her landlord. The front door opened before we could ring the bell, and there stood Sylvia in all her glory, designer dress, flawless makeup, and that practiced look of disapproval she reserved just for me. "Mark, darling." She embraced my husband, then gave me a cold once-over. "Clara, still shopping at Target, I see." If only she knew my cheap sweater was hand-knitted from rare vicuna wool and cost more than her monthly rent. But I just smiled and said, "Merry Christmas, Sylvia." The mansion's grand foyer was decorated like a department store display, with a 12-foot Christmas tree dripping in ornaments and professionally arranged garlands on every surface. Family members were already gathered. Mark's sisters Angela and Vanessa with their investment banker husbands, and all 4 of his cousins, who worked in proper professions like law and medicine. "Clara, do tell everyone what you're doing these days," Sylvia called out loudly as we entered the living room. "Still teaching, is it?" I nodded. "4th grade. "How noble," Angela snickered. "Though I can't imagine surviving on such a salary." They had no idea that while I did teach 4th grade 3 days a week, I also ran one of the country's most successful educational technology companies. My teaching position was purely for the joy of it and for research and development for my company's products. While Sylvia sighed dramatically, "We can't all be successful. Speaking of which, we have a slight problem with sleeping arrangements." Here it came, the same ritual humiliation she orchestrated every year. "The guest rooms will be needed for family, of course," she continued. "Clara dear, I'm afraid you'll have to sleep in the basement. We've put a cot down there somewhere." Mark started to protest, but I squeezed his hand. We discussed this. He wanted to tell his family about my success. But I had other plans. "The basement will be fine," I said quietly. Sylvia's smile was pure victory. "Wonderful. Mark, you'll be in your old room, of course. Can't have you sleeping in the basement with, well." I watched her face carefully, memorizing every detail of her smug expression. In less than 24 hours, that look would be replaced by something very different. The afternoon proceeded as expected. Sylvia paraded her wealthy children and their spouses around like prize ponies, making sure to contrast their success with my modest career at every opportunity. Angela's husband Greg bragged about his latest acquisition, while Vanessa's spouse Peter detailed his new summer home in the Hamptons. If only some of us had been more ambitious, Sylvia sighed, looking pointedly at me. Mark could have done so much better. I bit back a smile, thinking of the documents in my briefcase upstairs. Mark had done better than any of them knew, not because of my wealth, but because he'd married someone who loved him for himself, not his potential earning power. At dinner, I was seated at the far end of the table, away from Mark, next to the children's table. Sylvia made a show of serving the family first, leaving me with whatever remained. "I hope you don't mind the regular wine," she said, pouring me something from a cheap bottle while the others enjoyed expensive champagne. "We save the good stuff for special guests." "This is fine," I replied, sipping what I recognized as a $5 grocery store wine. I thought of my wine cellar at home, filled with vintages that would make Sylvia faint if she knew their value. As the evening wore on, Sylvia's comments grew more pointed, fueled by expensive champagne and an appreciative audience. "You know, Clara," she said loudly during dessert, "when Mark first married you, I thought surely he'd come to his senses quickly. A teacher, and not even at a private school." The table tittered with polite laughter. "But here we are, 5 years later, and you're still, well, exactly where you started. No advancement, no ambition, nothing to contribute to the family's status." I helped myself to another slice of pie. "We all contribute in our own ways, Sylvia." "Oh yes, I'm sure you teach those little children very well," she patronized. "Though it must be difficult living on such a modest salary. Mark tells me you insisted on keeping your finances separate, probably for the best, really. Wouldn't want to drag him down. If she only knew that my company's latest valuation was higher than the combined net worth of everyone at this table, including her precious sons-in-law's investments. As the evening wound down, Sylvia made a show of directing everyone to their rooms. Angela, Greg, you have the blue suite. Vanessa, Peter, the rose room. Cousins, you're in the East Wing guest rooms. She turned to me with false concern. Clara, you'll find the basement door by the kitchen. I believe there's a bathroom down there somewhere. Mark tried one last time. Mother, this is ridiculous. Clara should stay in my room. Absolutely not, Sylvia declared. This house has standards, Mark. Besides, I'm sure Clara is used to humble accommodations. I picked up my overnight bag. The basement will be fine, Mark. Really? Sylvia's voice followed me down the basement stairs. There might be some old blankets in a box somewhere. Do try not to disturb the Christmas decorations stored down there. The basement was cold and dusty, with bare concrete floors and exposed pipes. The promised cot was a rusty frame with a thin mattress that had seen better days. But I didn't mind. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. I changed into my silk pajamas, which Sylvia would have recognized as costing more than her monthly utility bill, and settled onto the cot with my laptop. Time to prepare for tomorrow's revelation. My phone buzzed with a text from Mark. I'm so sorry about this. Please let me come down there. I smiled and replied, stay in your room. Trust me, tomorrow will be worth it. Another text, this one from my company's legal team. All documents prepared as requested, ready to proceed at your signal. Perfect. I could hear laughter from upstairs as the real family enjoyed their evening. Sylvia's voice carried through the heating vents, regaling everyone with stories of her country club membership and social connections. If only she knew that her continued access to that lifestyle existed solely at my discretion. I opened my laptop and began reviewing the documents one last time. Tomorrow would change everything, but for now, I had work to do. The basement might be cold and uncomfortable, but it was giving me exactly what I needed, the perfect stage for what was to come. The tension in the room was palpable as everyone stared at me. Vivian, ever the matriarch, demanded, "What is the meaning of this?" I smiled as I removed a neat stack of papers from the envelope. Well, Vivian, since you've brought up the house, it seems like the perfect time to reintroduce myself. Not as your daughter-in-law, a fourth-grade teacher, but as Eliza Harper, CEO of Horizon Innovations and the owner of this estate. A stunned silence gripped the room. What? What are you talking about? Vivian's voice wavered, her usual composure fracturing. I placed the documents on the table, one by one. Here's the deed to the property under Vanguard Holdings LC. That's my holding company, in case you're wondering. This, I continued, sliding another paper forward, is the lease agreement you signed. And for good measure, here's last month's Forbes issue featuring me in their 30 Under 30 spotlight. From behind me, Sebastian placed his hands reassuringly on my shoulders, his quiet pride unmistakable. Sienna sputtered, "This has to be a joke. You're a teacher." I nodded calmly. I am, 3 days a week, because I love it. But the rest of the time, I run a billion-dollar company that designs advanced educational platforms. My teaching job gives me direct insights into how to make our products better. Vivian sank into her chair, her hands trembling as she reached for the documents. But the lease is being terminated, I said smoothly. You have 60 days to vacate as per the legal notice enclosed. You can't do this. Claudia's voice rose in panic. This is Mother's home. I can, and I am, I replied. Vivian, you made me sleep in the basement of my own house on Christmas Eve. You've belittled and demeaned me for years. Now you'll learn what it feels like to lose your seat at the table. Chaos erupted. Sienna and Claudia's husbands began arguing about legal loopholes, while Vivian sat frozen in her chair, grappling with the reality of her situation. The staff, Vivian whispered suddenly. They've been different lately. Did they know? Of course, I said. They work for me now, and they've been invaluable in documenting how you've treated them. But where will I go? She asked, her voice cracking. Perhaps the basement? I suggested with a small smile. I hear it's adequate for people of modest means. Sebastian's grip on my shoulders tightened slightly, as if cautioning me. I sighed and softened my tone. Don't worry, I've arranged for a 2-bedroom unit at a retirement community nearby. The first year's rent is paid. After that, you'll need to manage within your means. Vivian's face crumpled. A retirement community? My friends will likely join you soon when their financial situations become apparent. I said coolly, this isn't just about the house. It's about teaching you a lesson in humility. Claudia rose dramatically. Mother can live with us. Can she? I asked, tilting my head. Are you sure Liam's investment woes can handle that expense? Liam's sudden interest in his coffee cup spoke volumes. And Sienna? I continued. Although given Darren's unfortunate habit of leveraging your assets for risky ventures, I wouldn't bet on it. Neither Darren nor Sienna dared respond. I gathered the documents and returned them to the envelope. You have 2 months, Vivian. The house contents stay. And perhaps consider canceling your club membership. You won't be able to afford the dues. Why? Vivian asked softly. Why did you let me stay here at all? Because I wanted you to experience living at someone else's mercy, to understand what it's like to depend on kindness you haven't earned. I stood signaling to Sebastian. We'll be leaving now. Enjoy your Christmas, and the presents under the tree. Consider them severance gifts. In the car, Sebastian glanced at me. Did you really buy the estate just to teach them a lesson? I chuckled. No, it's a valuable property. Teaching them a lesson was just a delightful bonus. He reached for my hand. Angry? Are you kidding? You've been the bigger person for years, letting them walk all over you. I'm amazed at how you handled it. The timing was right, I said simply. And making me sleep in the basement of my own house? That sealed the deal. 6 months later, I hosted a family dinner at the estate, now remodeled to suit my tastes. Vivian had settled into her retirement apartment and sent me a letter of apology. Sienna and Claudia had become far more respectful, likely due to her residents' continued media coverage. Vivian arrived in a simple outfit, her previous hauteur replaced by humility. Eliza, she said warmly, thank you for inviting me. I nodded. Would you like a tour? She followed me through the rooms she once ruled, now transformed. The formal sitting room was a library. Guest rooms had become an office and a technology lab. We ended in the basement, now a sophisticated wine cellar. Far better than a cot, don't you think? I said lightly. Vivian traced the label of a fine vintage. I used to serve this at parties. I know you called it a special occasion wine, though it was quite average. Much like this house was a facade for wealth you didn't actually have. She flinched but nodded. I've learned. About what matters. About real accomplishment. Good, I said gently. That's what this was about. Not revenge, but education. And as a teacher, I believe in second chances. Upstairs, Sebastian showed Sienna and Claudia my latest project designs. For once, they listened attentively. Later in my office, Sebastian wrapped his arms around me, happy. I leaned back against him. The best revenge isn't power or wealth. It's teaching someone to grow. Vivian called me dear tonight, and she meant it. He laughed. The CEO who still sees herself as a teacher. Always, I replied. Some lessons just take a different kind of classroom.